Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today, joining me for the first time on P Guru's channel is author, anthropologist, and a scholar of Northeastern region, Rami Niranjan Desai. She has spent several years studying the various states, various tribes in the Northeast, and I thought I'll bring in a perspective that perhaps is not the same that you have been seeing in previous P Guru's programs. So let's go ahead and welcome Rami Desai ji. Rami ji, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel. How are you?
Namaskar. It is such a privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So, viewers, I have to tell you this. The first time I talked to Ramiji, I felt so chuffed because she said that Ramiji's mom does not miss a single video of P Gurus. I mean, it's because of such viewers that I feel like getting up in the morning and doing more stuff, be more accurate, be more insightful. So, thank you so much to all those of you who are watching my videos. Sometimes the video may not be up to your mark in video content, whatever, but you're very forgiving. Thank you so much. And also along those lines, please like this video because it's very important. Ramiji has spent a fair amount of time in the Northeastern region. So Ramiji, I'll start the question by saying that why now this problem has taken front and center. It used to be a problem for a long time. What exactly has changed?
So, you see, I think it's important to understand that these problems are all legacy problems. They're rooted in history. This is not the first time conflicts of such order have happened. There have been conflicts before as well. There's been the Kuki-Naga conflict, the Kuki-Paiti conflict. And a lot of these tensions and a lot of the anxiousness that you see on both sides of the communities is because of the historical legacy issues, and interrelationships that have happened. Of course, when we talk about why it has happened this time, we have to understand that many conflicts, and one of the things that I do study is conflicts and insurgencies and militancies with a special reference to the Northeast. So, one of the things that I have observed, and this is common to other conflicts as well, is that it is not about one instance. Yes, there can be a trigger, but it's multiple layered problems that come together, and one community or another reaches what we call a response threshold. And that is what we see has happened in Manipur. Now, obviously, when we look at it from the outside, we think the reason was the inclusion in the scheduled tribe list. I find that argument a bit flimsy because this was a recommendation made by the High Court to the state government to further recommend anybody who is from these areas, from these communities, knows that that is not the only way. That is not the way that you get into or you get a scheduled tribe inclusion. It is a very long process. The state government cannot give it to you. It has to go through different levels of discussions and dialogues and verification. So it'll go to NCST, it'll go to TRI, it'll go to tribal ministry. Thereon, you may or may not get a scheduled tribe inclusion. Also, even if the government allows you to be a new inclusion in the scheduled tribe list, you have a right, or people dissenting or the opposition will have a right to say no, we don't agree with it. And then, like the Banjara case down south, the case can go on for 20 years. So obviously this was no finality. This was just a suggestion because the petition had been in the court since 2012 or 13. So it was a long time coming. But this is how we see it. The other reasons that possibly have added to this, and of course, we also have to be very, very careful about what we say and what aspersions we cast in a situation like this, because right now information is just trickling out. We don't know, the details of the investigations or what are being found out, and I think that's a good idea because right now things are so sensitive that. A lot of these investigations must be kept under wraps. But of course, there's a question of illegal infiltration. There's a question of land issue, in the sense of now that everybody knows that the Metis have access to less than 10% of the land, which is Imphal Valley, and, the tribal populations, which doesn't just include the Cookies, also includes the Nagas, has authority over the rest of the land. So obviously there's this land issue, there's this illegal infiltration issue, there's also an issue of which leads from illegal infiltration, which is demographic change. So all of these issues have come together and created the situation that we see today.
So, Ramiji, the main concern here is the feeling that one side is actually creating a victim narrative that's being picked up by outside agencies, and is that being blown out of proportions? For example, if one person, like, I'll give you a simple analogy, Remiji. In the United States, there are lots of bars, there are lots of fights in bars. When the police comes in to establish law and order, the first thing they find out is who threw the first punch. So if you think that it was not the recommendation of the High Court, then who really threw the first punch in your opinion? Was it the Cookies or was it the Métis who said that this is enough, this is not right? Whatever it is, who started this thing?
So I wouldn't want to conjecture here because I really, I don't have the evidence in front of me. But this is what has been happening. This was only one part of the conflict. There had been skirmishes before that, and that had been happening, every month from the beginning of this year or even from the end of last year. And a lot of it had to do with the removal of illegal settlements in forest areas. And like that forest areas comes, they are protected areas. They come under the central government. Settlement there is not allowed. And you'll be surprised that there was actually somebody who one of the legislative assembly members, who was a tribal member, who was allocated this job of identifying illegal settlements in forest areas and uh, illegal settlers. And almost, I think, if I'm not wrong, by the number 38 villages were, they were identified, and this report was left midway. This was pre-conflict, So of course, on one hand, we have, a community saying that there was no dialogue done before cancelling the licenses of these villages, and there should have been some dialogue. And obviously, there's another side saying, well, they were illegal. So there were low intensity conflicts, skirmishes happening already before this situation happened. But again, if we take the line of thought that it is the scheduled tribe inclusion recommendation made by the High Court, which is the trigger, then this is what I have to say. I think that if you want to oppose something, you have the right to oppose something. This is a democratic country, and we've seen, how absolutely functional our freedom of speech is here. Therefore, you could have used your voice for dissent, but I cannot legitimize dissent turning into anarchy, and that is what happened if we take this situation, which is the scheduled tribe inclusion, as the trigger. Now, if we go back and say, well, there were low intensity skirmishes happening, then I have a lot of people, I would hold a lot of people accountable. For example, illegal infiltration, we know that that's been happening. We also know that it's very tough to stop illegal infiltration because these are very large borders. You have 1,640 kilometers of border, Indo-Myanmar border. These are thickly forested, densely, forested, difficult terrains. It is very difficult to man them. Even if you fence it, you are only as strong as your weakest link. But however, we have known that this infiltration has been slowly trickling in, and it's not a new thing. Um, the settlement of this infiltration is an issue. Now, if you look at Mizoram, the neighboring state, you have 40,000 refugees that have been registered. If you look at Manipur, there wasn't a single refugee that was registered. So this to me becomes problematic and becomes reasons for discontent and suspicion and anxiety from one community to another. Of course, then there are other situations like um, the Sioux agreements and the militancy and so on and so forth. But yes, if your question is where do I think this started from, and if I was to take the popular narrative of the inclusion in scheduled tribe list, then I think the people, the communities that had a problem with this sort of recommendation should have held back on their actions.
Ramiji, one question here. Myanmar is pushing the Rohingyas out of its territory. I mean, they have a right to live in that land. I don't know why neither the UN nor the United States nor anybody else is censoring Myanmar and saying that, look, these are your people. You have to find a way to coexist with them. You cannot be driving them out. Whatever the problem India is facing, I believe that Bangladesh is facing 10 times that much influx. I could be wrong about this. But why are the normally, organizations like UN or United States not talking to Myanmar and saying, why are you doing this?
So, you see, the Myanmar question is complicated. The people coming in are not Rohingyas. This is from the umbrella group of the Chin Kuki tribes. So, um, let me go back a little bit into history.
Yeah.
The word Kuki, the word Naga, this is not one solid tribe. These were multiple different tribes, multiple different sub tribes that come up under this nomenclature, which was given to them by the British for the British to understand it better. And of course, they are loosely connected. You can call them cousin tribes. But let's say the Nagas. The Nagas have about 16 plus sub tribes under them. They didn't even often speak the same language. They had very different sort of identities. It was the British that brought them together under the umbrella term Nagas. If you were, and it's very, very recent, if you were to ask some of the Naga grandmothers, even now, if they self identified as Nagas, this word would be alien to them. Now, it's the same with cookies. Cookies also is not one homogeneous tribe. There are many sub tribes, they're the Mars, they're the Taiti, so on and so forth. The Chin is the umbrella tribe. And in Myanmar, the Chin states have a problem of insurgency with or against the Myanmarese government. And that has been a problem for a really long time. So this region has been unstable. Myanmar is a very large country. It has different ethnic groups. It has areas that are completely difficult to govern. There have been multiple insurgencies, and historically, if you were to look at it, even some of the longest running separatist groups like the NSCN were got passage of way via Myanmar to go to places in China to get their training. So all the NSAN leaders use this route to go into China. So, this area has always been a bit problematic to us in terms of the fact that therein lies unstable populations and unstable geographical areas already. Now, there has been a crackdown on these groups, groups that are considered insurgent groups by the Myanmarese government. There has been a crackdown on them, and therefore there has been a certain amount of influx into India. Now, when we talk about the UN, you know, fair enough. Why haven't they called them out on this sort of thing? But I don't think a lot of these people understand. Now, for example, the United States has put sanctions on Myanmar, and they've called it Burma 2020. See, whether you call it Myanmar, whether you call it Burma, this has very different connotations. And they've specifically called it Burma 2020, and they put sanctions. Now, the problem with sanctions, or the problem with going against the present regime, is that the Chinese footprint is increasing in Myanmar. And you are going to give more leverage to China to step in. Therefore, India's neutral stance, I think, really is a class act. Because, as much as we believe in democracy, and we've said this, that, we believe that Myanmar must work towards achieving democracy again, the fact is they are our neighbors. The fact is that it's a hugely important place for us, because that is where we fulfill our dreams of our Act East policy. That is where we connect to Southeast Asia from. And more importantly, the gateway to that is more in Manipur. So for us to be able to coordinate, to have dialogue open with Myanmar, to be able to coordinate on issues like this with Myanmar is very important. So I personally don't care whether any of these international agencies pull up Myanmar or not. My focus is on how India deals with Myanmar, and I think so far it has been you know a great act of foreign policy to be neutral. Now, the result of that is, if you remember, right at the outset of this conflict, um, the military junta, the Myanmarese government had taken out a notice. That notice warned its citizens living across the border in India illegally not to go against the law, not to indulge in any sort of communal activities, and not to indulge in any sort of illegal activities like poppy growing. Now, this has very important, it's not going to solve the conflict, but it has very important messaging that goes out. If a government is accepting that our citizens are causing a certain amount of problem there, that our citizens are, indulging in illegal activity, it gives you some amount of strength of conviction that this is what's happening. Of course, even after that, I have had uh, people from either or of the community in Manipur say, no, there's no illegal infiltration, no, there's no poppy cultivation. This is absolutely wrong because here you have a neighborhood, country from where these infiltrators are coming who are accepting that infiltration is happening. So, in context of Myanmar, I think it's a very important relationship. It has its own problems. It has areas that it cannot govern. This is a problem that we are going to have with the Kaladan multimodal project when it goes into its second stage of road building. We are going to have this problem because it goes through these, areas. But that is something that we can still deal with. At this point, I think our immediate concern, wherein Myanmar is, should be this sort of verification of the immigrants that are coming in. You see, we also have 16 kilometers on either side, which is free movement area, wherein immigrants can come in, do their trade, and go out. The reason being that before these boundaries were drawn, tribal communities had a certain amount of free movement going, from one place to another. They were dependent on trade, they were dependent on the interactions. And therefore, there is this allotment of 16 kilometers of free movement area on either side. However, the problem is that Assam Rifles doesn't have any mechanism, and of course, that goes back to the government of India as well, wherein they track the immigrants coming in and going back. So once they come in, they don't know who's come in and who's gone back. And I think those are the initiatives that they are starting to take now. The government of India is starting to take now, so that they can track the movements of uh, all sort of cross-border movement.
Uh, has India recognized Myanmar's military government now after they overthrew Aung Suu Kyi?
Uh, India has kept its channels open. Like I said, they've played a neutral sort of observer. They've said that we, support democracy and we hope that there can be a state of democracy, but it isn't as if, they've seized dialogue.
Um, the question is, will this thing continue? Will Rohingyas continue to leave Myanmar and settle themselves all over India? Because this has reached even the southernmost regions in India. I'm eyewitness to that, Ramiji. I've seen this thing. So it is a concern because the politicians in India see an opportunity, see a captive vote bank, and things go downhill from there. How does one stop this? Because somewhere something has to stop. What is the way forward in Manipur? I think that is the bigger question I'm asking.
So, see, if you're talking about Rohingyas, that's a different set of problems. A lot of the Rohingyas that we've seen and the railway police has been caught from Tripura area. And this is going to be a continuous problem, sir. This is not going to be a problem that we're going to be able to solve very easily because of basic reasons. Reasons that India is um, far more attractive than any of our countries in the neighborhood. And it's
Economically.
economically, safety wise, if you compare India to any of the neighboring countries, I think India would seem the most attractive. Over and above that, I think also we have to look at this in the future. There's a lot of climate change that's happening. Now, one of the things that experts have said, and I'm no expert on environment or climate, but this is something that is often spoken about, is that a zero point 0.5 degree change in temperatures will bring 10 million refugees from Bangladesh on our doorstep. So the problem is not just about Rohingya, the problem is much bigger, for which the solutions are going to be, have to thought through, we'll have to think through it, are not going to be a single dimensional solution. We have to have a multi-dimensional solution. And yes, I agree with you that the Rohingya problem is a problem. It's not just a problem onto the northeast, but we've also seen the kind of settlements that have happened from other routes on the northwestern frontier, which is in Kashmir, where we have found illegal settlers of the Rohingyas marrying local.
Yeah.
But like I'm saying, for us, Rohingyas is one problem. What do we do when that kind of immigration lands up on our borders? Now, also, you must understand that a lot of this immigration, whether it's the northwestern frontier, whether it's the northeastern frontier, both frontiers are difficult frontiers for us. If you look at the northwestern frontier, you have Pakistan, which, the state of its economy, the rise of Taliban's impact on Pakistan, everything's including, the kind of dynamics we are seeing there, is dynamics that we haven't seen before. We have the BLA, which is partnering with Taliban. We never thought that these kind of unions would ever come together. An implosion there will bring women and children to our doorsteps. An implosion in, the northeastern frontier will bring women and children to our doorstep. And the northeastern frontier, again, the same thing. If there's a regime change, if there's climate change, if they are on our doorsteps, this is a fact that no military, no defense force will ever be able to prevent them from coming in, because force will never be used by any defense forces across the world against women and children. That is the larger question.
So, in a way, the IMF loan to Pakistan is sort of a blessing in disguise.
I don't know. It's like, they're getting money to pay it further, onto, their loans. It's like a vicious cycle. So,
right.
In my opinion, yes, I don't think Pakistan implosion, an implosion of Pakistan would really
It's
be
good
great
for India. Yeah. Thank you so much. And let's have a few questions with your permission. I have about 3 or 4 questions from our viewers. If I could just ask them for you. Just one moment, please. Rahul Rathod wants to know, is it possible to declare Northeast as union territory? As we have seen with J&K, local politics complicate already sensitive state. After union territory, J&K is not boiling like before.
Yes, but J&K is different to the Northeast. I still think that the Northeast. We must give credit to the Northeast for having the kind of relative peace that it's had, for being able to change the perception that we had of the Northeast. So when I used to travel 10, 15 years ago, everybody used to be really worried about, you're going to the Northeast, it's so dangerous, travel is so difficult. It was psychologically so distant to us. But in the last 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, the change that I have seen is enormous. The relative peace that has come in the last 6 years, even in Manipur, there were no skirmishes. And I often quote this, and many people who watch me must have seen me repeat this.
Yes.
I used to go 10 years ago. There were no restaurants. There were no places to stay. There were no young kids who were coming back, finishing college, and then coming back. When I started going in the last 6 years, I saw young kids finishing college, getting their, work experience and coming back to Imphal, which was very heartwarming because it tells you about the situation of Imphal. They were starting restaurants. There were world-class restaurants. There were world-class hotels. There was infrastructure coming up. So I think This is something obviously for the people of the Northeast to decide, for people of Manipur to decide, for the government of India to decide. In my opinion, I think being able to govern your own state is a great, I think it is a great privilege, and I think that is what we should be aiming at. And, we should be aiming at bringing back normalcy. And of course, at this point, there is a trust deficit from all corners against the political dispensation. And that obviously our democratic, environment allows us to change. So yes, that would be my limited take on that.
Before I go to the next question, my own doubt, Ramiji, Manmohan Singh talked about look east policy. Modi government has done an act east policy. They want to have a connect all the way from Delhi to deep south, all the way through Myanmar and beyond. And the same thing China is also trying to do. It is damming up Ma Ganga, which is called Mekong there, or Airavati, which is the elephant of Indra, the river there. Now, with this, I mean, they would definitely continue to see progress, but blocks like this, would it not set back that initiative?
Course, and this is what I've said. You're bang on, Manipur, which had become a vision of peace and had become, a state that was unrecognizable because it had progressed so far. Again, today is being seen from the lens of, conflict. And like I said, More on the border of Manipur is our gateway to Southeast Asia. um, this is what is really going to impact our Act East policy. And we've done really, really well with the Act East policy in terms of stabilizing the Northeast. Never in history have we had so many insurgent groups, so many insurgents come on board. Right down to their rehabilitation has been thought through. We've never seen such comprehensive, such detailed rehabilitation packages for insurgents who have come overboard. The kind of infrastructure we've seen, the kind of connectivity that we've seen has had an impact on the Northeast in ways that we've never seen before. Imphal, there was a time when you couldn't find a direct flight there. The flights were hugely expensive. Today, you have multiple flights a day. You can reach there quickly. And we have the railroads coming up. So all of this will stop at this point because of the conflict. And who is it going to impact the most? It's going to impact, again, the people of Manipur more than anybody else. Now, we have to look at the larger context. One of the grievances that have come has been that, oh, there isn't enough development in the hill areas. How will there be development? How will there be infrastructure if you're not going to open yourselves up? Because infrastructure and development is going to bring certain amount of connectivity, certain amount of migrant population that will have to settle down legally, and that's not going to happen just with Imphal being a place where you can settle down. So I think we have to open our minds up. I think we have to look at it in ways of what the Northeast can be, what Manipur can be, and what we brought it down to.
Thank you. And let's go to the next question. Is the sixth schedule of Constitution one of the historic blunders as it did not serve any purpose, neither development, neither or nor Northeast people became tolerant towards democracy? They are still fighting civil war.
See, I wouldn't say that this is civil war, and I wouldn't say that the Northeast people are fighting civil wars. I would say that yes, Northeast has been in a state of flux for many years, but that has changed. Now, why it was like that is very evident to everybody. There were certain British policies that were brought in, but also this contrived idea of the tribe that was also brought in by the British. We didn't really have these bifurcations of tribe, non-tribe, animus, non-animus, just the way the caste was created in a way for the British to understand in four bifurcations. The same way these kind of divisions were created. And these were not natural to our civilizational lens because we live side by side for thousands of years. That's why we have the kind of connectivity civilizational connectivity, historical connectivity. We see this in our history books. We see mention of Pragjotishpur, we see mention of Kamrup, we see mention of Bhaskar Barman, Rukmani, Chitran Gada, Hidamba, all being connected in one way or another to the Northeast and very alive in our civilizational memory. So, of course, there are these divisions that were made, and these divisions then were implemented through the rules and regulations that were brought in. So, for example, the inner line regulation, or the idea of scheduled areas. Now, these are rules and regulations that we don't need right now, yet are being implemented. I mean, unfortunately for Manipur, it's brought in data. So, yes, there are problems with these kind of, call them rules or regulations, or call them privileges. There are problems because once you give it, you can never take it back. Also, it comes with a lot of benefits. So, for example, in Manipur, the tribal communities will get income tax exemption. They will have 31% reservation in administration and education. This is not just the cookies, this is all tribals. They have their own hill councils that can determine on majority of issues pertaining to themselves, like healthcare, family uh, laws, so on and so forth. Everything except financial bills. Now, who will want to let go of these privileges? And of course, while we accept and recognize and appreciate the uniqueness of these communities, of these tribal communities, my problem is that a lot of these rules, regulations, policies, which were brought in terms of protecting tribes, to me, a lot of them eventually build long-term divisions, like they have built in our country versus tribals versus non-tribals. I mean, I think we need to go back into our own civilization and intelligence to understand how complex societies like ours worked seamlessly in history and bring that back.
Thank you so much. And this is the last question from our viewers. Is there any situation in which Biren Singh is not sacked or removed? It's not an if, but when. Would that make even a difference?
I think the last part of this question is very, very important. Would that even make a difference? Because the fault lines, I believe this, that the fault lines are very deep in between the two communities because of the level of violence that we've seen. And also, like I said, there's a response threshold wherein it almost has come to a point where one or the other cannot take it anymore. So I think those fault lines have deepened. And I think this is not so much about the political dispensation anymore, as it was before, as it is about civil society coming together. You see, the fact of the matter is that these communities have lived together historically. They don't have anywhere else to go. They will have to continue to live together, and they will have to make amends. However, this is going to be difficult unless civil society doesn't come up and take responsibility and begin dialogue. There was a point right at the beginning of this conflict, and I have met the cookies, I have met the Murphys, I've met representations from both ends. There was a time when I could see the clear difference wherein one community said we're willing to have dialogue, and the other community said no, nothing doing. We don't want any dialogue. We want a solution before peace. I have seen the same people change, and that gives me hope. I have the same people saying no, it's gone out of hand. We didn't expect the fringe elements to take over. Unfortunately, that's what happens in conflict. Eventually the reason why you started the conflict is forgotten, and eventually it's the fringe elements that take over. And I'm sure that people like you, me, the gentleman who's asking this question, we are not the kind of people who, even if a sophisticated weapon was in our hands, we would use it on another person. But why has it happened? It's happened because there are these vested interests, there are these fringe groups, there are these motivations within communities who are willing to take it this far. But that dialogue has changed. I have seen people say now that yes, I think dialogue is necessary. Of course, that dialogue will have to have neutral observers. Who those neutral observers is for these communities to decide. In my opinion, it could be the Nagas. The Nagas are, the third component in Manipur. and they have been through their prolonged experience, their emotional experience of insurgencies. They know how to tackle this. My really my point here is that as much as we want to put the responsibility on the government, and the government must be, held responsible and accountable, and I'm sure the population in Manipur, the communities in Manipur will decide for themselves when the election comes up. But more than that, I think it's important to hold ourselves responsible, because we have seen um, people give hate speeches. We have seen people instigate this. We have seen communities come out on the roads. Now, there are many, many examples where the back of militancy, the back of illegal immigration has been broken solely by the involvement of the community members that live on the borders and live in these areas. I have often given, an example of Tripura, where the community that lived on the border uh, refused to give passage of way to infiltrators and insurgents coming in from Bangladesh. And that became a major reason that they were able to tackle the insurgency in Tripura. We have seen Kachin women come out and become informal, even if not like formal informers, but have informed on the kind of passage of way or sheltering that happens with insurgents. Now, a lot of this happens because they are, cousin tribes, and you feel a sense of affinity. Uh, but the fact of the matter is that illegal infiltration is illegal infiltration, and any sort of settlement that is happening within these populations, it is the responsibility of civil society to call them out. Because then, otherwise, the responsibility of the repercussions of that become yours. So whether this government goes, doesn't go, we have to wait and watch. Nobody can predict this, because if you remember, when Rahul Gandhi visited Manipur, the very next day, the chief minister went out to give his resignation and was stopped by people. So whether a community likes it, whether people like it, whether they don't, the fact of the matter is that by the virtue of us being a democratic nation, you know, considerations of all populations are taken in, So I don't think the real question is about what is going to happen with the political dispensation. I think the real question is how now the communities in Manipur are going to tackle this. We've been embarrassed on, an international front. We have had vested interest right to the United Nations, right to international authorities to come in, interfere in our internal matters. I think now voices need to come up that say, look, we don't need anybody to come and solve our problems. We're going to solve our problems because we're very capable of doing it. And you see what happens is people at this point, because there is this sort of loyalty towards one community or another, and they want to be heroes in their community, they take a hardliner stance. What they don't understand is the people who come out of these communities who are going to call for unification, who are going to call for cessation of, who are going to call for some amount of peace, are people who are going to be remembered in history very kindly. And that is going to be very important for us. So, yes, I think civil society role is very important.
Thank you so much, Ramiji. It's time for the moderate Manipur to wake up and assert themselves and make sure that the fringe elements don't set the narrative for the entire state. I'm sure messages like this are now beginning to resonate, and I'm hoping that things will come back to normal and India will start progressing again on the Act East policy. Ramiji, thank you so much for spending time with us, and you've really given a very what I would call as an objective perspective about looking at it from a historical angle, as well as what exactly ails the problems there, what needs to happen. So let's hope that normalcy returns very soon. Thank you once again. Viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Ramiji, thanks once again. Namaskar.
Thank you.